Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Nikita, and on this channel we talk about inclusivity and diversity in reading and in real life, especially a focus on South Asian stories. So you can expect a lot of book chats, book recommendations about BIPOC stories, as well as my podcast called Brown People Problems. Thank you so much for being here for another video, and for today's video, I wanted to share with you some of the books that I read in the month of May and my hopefuls for the month of June. I couldn't read as many as I wanted to in the month of May. It was a very busy month for me, but I still read some really lovely books and some not so lovely books. May was Mental Health Month, as well as AAPI Month, which is Asian American Pacific Islander Month. So I did a lot of mental health related reading. I will not be sharing that in here today. If you are interested in my mental health book recommendations, check out my last video. It'll be linked up here for you, as well as down below. I tried to incorporate as many AAPI voices as I possibly could and felt, engaged with for this month. All right, the very first book that I read in the month of May is Morewood Family Rules by Helen K. Demon? I'm not sure. This is a book that just came out in May or April, and I was extremely excited for it. If you see the description on Goodreads, it's described as Knives Out type of a family drama, but unfortunately I was extremely disappointed with this one. I gave it a 2 stars. This is now in my donation pile, and I was really heartbroken about that because I was really looking forward to this book. To describe this book as a Knives Out type of a narrative, I think was a little bit misleading, and I think other people have something similar to say on Goodreads, because it really wasn't. This follows like a family drama. So you have our main character, Gillian Morewood, who returns from prison, and her purpose is she comes from a family of con artists. So when she returns from prison, her whole purpose is to get her family back on track and to quit their conning ways. And so you expect it to be like fun and a lot of drama and some satire, but it really wasn't it. The whole book was really just it just spanned like 4 days or 5 days, and there was no action in it. There's no Knives Out narrative in it. So unfortunately, this was not it for me. If any of you have different thoughts, let me know. After that, for the month of May, I read Partners in Crime by Alicia Rai. This is my first AAPI book of the month, and this was incredible. This was my very first book by this author, and this is a huge romance subplot. Some would even call that the main plot, but it's so action-packed. So it's basically about our 2 characters, Mira and Naveen, who are exes, and it starts off with them just coming together for work reasons, and they get kidnapped together, and they go on this whirlwind of adventures around Vegas and LA and just different parts of the States, and trying to escape their kidnappers and trying to figure out what's going on. So it was a lot of fun, a really great way to kind of weave romance into something that's a lot more exciting and action-packed. I absolutely loved Alicia Rai's storytelling. The characters are very lovable, very relatable. Think Hangover, the movie Hangover, except obviously it's not a bachelor party, but think of Hangover, where things were going wrong and some really ridiculous things were happening to them. It was hilarious. So I really enjoyed this. I am going to be picking up more by this author, and I gave this a 4 stars. After that, I read the Bangalore Detectives Club on my Kobo from my library, and this was just a book that I stumbled upon, and it's actually quite fun. So it's set in 1920s Bangalore in India during the British rule, and it follows a young wife, Kaveri, I believe her name is, and her husband, who solve crimes in the Bangalorean high society. And it was a lot of fun. I picked it up because it reminded me of my much beloved Widows of Malabar Hill series that I talk a lot about on this channel, because it's also set in similar time, just in a different city in India. The Bangalore Detectives Club was good. I gave it 3 stars, but I think it could have had a lot more depth depth and a lot more mystery and intrigue, but it was a really good debut. I believe it's written by a woman who's a professor in Bangalore. And so, she's born and brought up there, so she knows like the history of the place really well. So it was still a pretty good book. I will still pick up part 2. Does it live up to Widows of Malabar Hill? Not for me personally, no. But I'm hoping that as the series goes on, we have a little bit more development from the characters. But if you like stories about female detectives, you would like it, because Kaveri is basically a new bride. So she is a stay-at-home wife, and like a bored stay-at-home wife, and she's looking for something to do. Unfortunately, social norms at that time don't permit her to work outside the home, and so she busies herself with expanding her social circle and learning math in secret because that's her passion. She happens to be at a gathering where there is a murder, and so because she's so inquisitive and so curious of a person, she finds herself involved in trying to figure out what happened, what's going on. So it was a fun book. After that, I read The Brilliant Life of Eudora Honeyset. And this book, my gosh, I give it 5 stars. And if you've been here for some time, I give 5 stars only to books that I consider life-changing for me. And this is a book that I've been seeing making its rounds for quite some time. I didn't pick it up. I didn't really feel called to it, but my gosh, I wish I had gotten to it sooner. This book is incredible, and it's going to be one of the books I gift to many people in my life as opportunities come up, because this is one book that I think everybody would love. Basically follows the story of Eudora, who's our main character. She's an older woman. She's an elderly woman living by herself, and the book starts off with her deciding that she is ready to die. Well, she's looking into assisted dying services in Switzerland, and because she's decided that that's it, she got everything that she could out of life, and now she's getting old and she's losing like her wits, and she just wants to die on her own terms. And coincidentally, new neighbors happen to move in who have a 10-year-old daughter named Rose. And an unlikely friendship and a reluctant friendship, at least on Eudora's part, forms between Rose and Eudora. 2 people who are so opposite, where 10-year-old Rose is so full of life, she's so inquisitive, and Eudora is a bit cranky and she's just done with it. And watching these 2 personalities come together, like, it's just so heartfelt. This book really brought me to tears in so many places, and it's really about Eudora finding purpose and joy in life again through this friendship with this 10-year-old. And I read it in a couple of days, and that was me really trying to make it last, because I didn't want this book to finish, and it was incredible. I think everybody should read it. If you've read The Rosie Project and you like that, if you've read Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine, you would like Eudora Honeyset. Very similar type of female protagonists. I'm already looking forward to a time when I can reread Eudora, because Eudora is one of my favorite characters of all time. All right, after that, I read Pride and Premeditation by Tirza Price, again on my Kobo. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a Jane Austen retelling. It's a YA Jane Austen retelling, which is a murder mystery. And this one is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. I was inspired to read this because you've probably heard me talk about The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. It's more like a literary fiction that I really enjoyed, which is like a murder mystery set in Jane Austen novels. And so the Pride and Premeditation book just sounded very similar, really drew me to it. It was not as good because it is written for a YA audience. The narrative is maybe, I don't want to say juvenile, but the narrative is less complex and more straightforward, if that makes sense. I still really enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars, which in my rating system is a good book. I will be reading the second one, which is called Sense and Second Degree Murder, which is a retelling of Sense and Sensibility. They're quite fun. In Pride and Premeditation, you have Elizabeth Bennet, who is working with her father in his law firm, and she's an aspiring lawyer. She's 17, and she gets herself caught in this murder case that is connected to the firm somehow. And that's when she runs into Mr. Darcy, and it was still really fun to read. I love books set in the Regency era, and just from like a YA perspective, it was a lot of fun. Still not as good as Claudia Gray's, and I am reading her The Late Mrs Willoughby, which I will be talking about in a bit. Not as good as that, because that's definitely like written a lot more in a really complex way, and it is more of a literary fiction than a YA. So they're in different categories, but check out Pride and Premeditation if you like your Jane Austen. It's very fun. All right, up next I have another 5-star read, which is Jamila Green Ruins Everything, Read It on My Kobo by Zarka Nawaz. If you are not sure who this author is, if you're Canadian, maybe some Americans would also know this, I don't know, but if you're Canadian and if you've ever seen that show, like I think 15 years ago or 20 years ago, it used to be on CBC, called Little Mosque on the Prairie, which is a sitcom inspired by Little House on the Prairie. So Little Mosque on the Prairie is written and produced by Zarka Nawaz. So she is a Canadian producer, an author living in Alberta. And so this is her book that she came out with. She's been apparently sitting on this idea for 10 years. And if you've seen the show Little Mosque on the Prairie, you would know it's an absolutely hilarious sitcom. And so is this book. So Jamila Green, I give it 5 stars because this is probably one of the most brilliant satires I have ever read. It is a literary fiction, but you basically have our character Jamila Green, who is an American Muslim woman, and she finds herself forming this like unlikely friendship. She doesn't believe in like religion, but she forms herself finding this unlikely friendship with her local imam, who is the head of the mosque. And it's satire in the sense that a whole bunch of things go wrong, but basically she has recently written a book and she would like it for it to be a bestseller. So she turns to God and she's trying to make a deal with God that please let my book be a New York Times bestseller. And so she goes to the imam, who encourages her to do some good deeds. So they start off by doing donations and donating, I believe it's like food or clothes, to like some homeless individuals. And the homeless individual that they form more of a connection and a friendship with, he ends up being recruited by a terrorist group. And it's hilarious because it's a funny rendition of a really popular terrorist group, and she calls it DICK, D-I-C-K is the acronym. It's hilarious. But basically what happens is, because that now homeless individual gets recruited by this terrorist group, FBI comes for Jamila and the imam, who are now good friends. And the imam like disappears mysteriously, has been taken by the FBI, and Jamila decides to save him and set off on this journey like across the world to infiltrate this terrorist group and rescue her friend. And it is absolutely hilarious. It is very compulsively readable. There's a lot of dark humor in it, and it was still a very like touching story. There were times when I was like laughing out loud. There were times where I was like feeling afraid for her. If you like satire, you would absolutely love it. I don't know, maybe I'm not doing it justice as I'm explaining it, but it was incredible, and I'm ordering a physical copy of it soon. There's also another book by Zarka Nawaz called Laughing on the Way to the Mosque. I believe that book that she wrote a few years ago was the inspiration for Little Mosque on the Prairie. I will definitely be ordering that as well. This book is definitely one for the books. All right, so I have to balance all these 5 stars out with a DNF. And I'm so sad to say that I started The Chai Factor by Farah Heron. If you have watched my last few videos, you will know I was really impressed by this author's South Asian retelling of Emma, Jane Austen novel. It's called Camilla Knows Best. And this is a book that I've had for years, but it's just been on my bookshelf. But I got about, I want to say 45% of the way through, and sadly I had to DNF it. I love the female protagonist. It follows a young South Asian Torontonian female engineer named Amira, who is returning back to her engineering job after finishing her postgraduate, and it's about like workplace biases against women, and she encounters all of that. And it's really about her like navigating life, and there's unlikely romance between her and a white man. And I just did not feel invested in the characters at all, like either of the characters. Their romance between them just didn't do anything for me. I don't know, maybe I just picked it up at a wrong time. And I really feel bad getting rid of this book because it is signed by the author. And she's a local author, and I really, really try to support my local authors. So I'm still considering if I'm going to get back to this at another time, maybe take it out of my donation pile. But I just did not feel connected with the characters at all. I don't know what else to say about it. If any of you have read it and you really enjoyed it, like, let me know your thoughts. I would love to chat with you, but I was sadly disappointed. So I'm a little bit scared to pick up other books from this author right now, because I don't know if I'm in that headspace, because she did come out with another book called Jana Goes Wild, which is sort of like a sequel of Camilla Knows Best, but I'm staying far away from it for now because I was really looking forward to that book, and I want to make sure that I'm in the right headspace, because I would hate to DNF another book by this author. I gave this 2 stars. All right, almost there. After that, I read one of the most anticipated books of the summer, which is Happy Place by Emily Henry, and I gotta say I really enjoyed it. I hate the fact that it's hardcover. I don't know why they chose to make it hardcover when all the other Emily Henrys are paperbacks, and I will be buying a paperback when it comes out. I was looking forward to this. I'm part of the Booktube community that absolutely loves Emily Henry. Do I think she's the best writer in the world? Probably not. Do I think that nobody can do banter as well as Emily Henry? Absolutely. Nobody can do banter as well as Emily Henry. The banter between her characters and just the wittiness her characters have is incredible. I love it, and I'm always invested in her characters. This one, I gave it a 4 stars. It was not a 5-star for me. For me, Book Lovers is still her number 1, followed by People We Meet on Vacation, followed by this, followed by Beach Read. But this was still a lot of fun. This basically follows the story of these 2 characters, Harriet and Wynne, who have been together for a long time and who were engaged, but they haven't told their best friends, and they're all going for like a summer cottage together, something that they do every year. What I really liked about this book was, in all of Emily Henry's other books, the whole story just revolves around the couple, but here we got so much more of the other friends as well, and the other characters, and I felt just as invested emotionally in all the other characters than just Harriet and Wynne. And the found family trope in here is just, it's beautiful. It's amazingly done. At times you really feel like your own wounds from bad friendships or unfulfilled needs from friendships really being filled with this book, if that makes sense. This was just such a warm hug in a book. I will definitely be rereading this. It was a great book. I definitely think it lives up to the hype. It was a little bit different than what she's done before, and I thought it was great. You know, I say that I didn't read as many books as I wanted to, but I clearly did, because I still have a couple more. The second last book that I read in the month of May was a reread of The Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So I actually read the entire ACOTAR series 6 years ago when it came out, so it's definitely ahead of the curve, and it's only now gaining a lot of popularity on BookTube and Book Talk. So I wanted to reread them because I really enjoyed this whole series the first time I read it, and I wanted to see if I would still like it now 6 years later, and I did. Gave it a 5 stars. If you don't know what this is a YA fantasy, dark fantasy, has some romance in it, and just the world building is incredible. So if you like high fantasies, you would really like this. I flew through it in 2 days. I'm definitely planning on rereading the other ones in the series as well. And lastly, for the month of May, I read The Fortunes of Jaded Women by Carolyn Huynh. I hope I pronounced Huynh right. This was hilarious, but also really touching. This is a story it's a multi-generational story about American Vietnamese women who have this like long-standing family curse that was placed upon them generations ago, that nobody in this family is going to bear sons, and they're only going to bear daughters, and they're all going to have like really bad relationships with one another. And so there's a huge cast of characters, so there's not just one or two protagonists, but the story follows now these American Vietnamese women in today's age trying to mend their relationships, trying to break this curse, trying to find their way back to one another because they're quite estranged. I absolutely loved the cultural commentary in this. There was a lot of mention of, because some books about different cultures will not really have many mentions of cultural food or cultural things, but this had like words in Vietnamese. I had to Google Translate. This was really, really great. I gave it a 4 stars. I was going into this, I was expecting to feel similarly as I did when I was reading anything by Jessie Q. Sutanto, which is Dilate for Aunties and Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. Didn't elicit the same reaction within me. And I don't want to compare the two because these are two different types of books, but this is definitely up there. If you like family drama, if you like Asian American voices, if you like some like mystery and intrigue, very little, but some mystery and intrigue, and just family members finding their way back to one another, you would really like this. All right, so that was everything I read in the month of May. And I wanted to share some of my June hopefuls with you. Very first, which I have already started, and today is June 2nd, I have already started, is The Late Mrs Willoughby by Claudia Gray. This is the sequel of The Murder of Mr. Wickham that you heard me talk about a few months ago. This is a Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney mystery. Takes place in the Jane Austen world, where all the characters from like Emma, Sense and Sensibility, like all these characters that come together and they know one another. And Jonathan Darcy is obviously the son of Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, and you have Miss Tilney, who is the daughter of like the Tilneys from Northanger Abbey. Yeah. And this is a literary fiction. While being a mystery, a murder mystery, it is very like, it really does feel like I'm reading a Jane Austen. The narrative is exactly the same. The writing is very, very similar. So this is not a book that you're going to fly through. It's just like older English, so it's going to take some time. But it sets amazing tone and environment because it's written like a Jane Austen novel. So far, it is great. I am 120 pages in. I absolutely love it. And I would recommend these books to everyone. Next up, I also want to read this month The Perfumist of Paris by Alka Joshi. This is the 3rd book in the Henna Artist series. I have also started this one. I'm about 40 pages in. This is great. If you haven't read the Henna Artist series, it's one of my favorite series. I recommend it to everyone. It's a historical fiction series that starts off in 1950s India, post-independence India, and it follows this really strong female protagonist who's just trying to make her name in the world as a henna artist. The 3rd book is a story of her younger sister, who is now a perfumist in Paris. So it's a multi-generational narrative across the series. Alka Joshi just writes beautifully. Like, her cultural commentary is incredible. You really feel like you're transported to that time and to that place. And I love her female characters. I love her women. They're complex, they're imperfect, but they're also really headstrong. And I absolutely love that. So I'm hoping to finish this month as well. Now, the month of June is Pride Month, as well as Indigenous History Month here in Canada. So I will be doing my best to focus on some LGBTQ stories as well as Indigenous stories. So for this month, I would really like to read Five Little Indians. And I'm waiting to get my hands on this book, but this is, it follows a bunch of characters who are taken from their homes, from their Indigenous communities in, I believe, British Columbia, and taken to residential schools. And it's more of, it follows them over the years and how they navigate the trauma and the abuse that was in the residential schools, and how it impacts their life, and how they find themselves now in downtown Eastside Vancouver. Really just like navigating life. I don't want to know more about this book going in because I like to go in blind in some of these books, but Five Little Indians has so much praise around it for really being one of the strongest voices about the Indigenous groups and their trauma in fiction. So I'm hoping to read that this month. Another book that I'm reading this month is The Gunkel, and it's about our main character, who is this like bachelor gay uncle of these two, like of his niece and nephew. He finds himself in a situation where he has to take care of them. So they move in with him in Palm Springs. So and he has to just like, he's never had children, he has to navigate, you know, what his role is as an uncle, and raising these children. I'm expecting some comedy, I'm expecting some satire, and I'm also expecting like a really heartfelt book, and a heartfelt story about family relationships. This is giving me Eudora Honeyset vibes, because you've got these like inquisitive children, and then you've got this like slightly grumpy and like removed from the world older man. He's not elderly by any means, but I believe he's in his 40s in the book. So I'm looking forward to that one. Also hoping to read in the month of June is Now You See Us by Balikaur Jaswal. This is the author of erotic stories for Punjabi widows. I'm sure you've heard me go on and on about that book, but this is her newer book. It came out only a couple months ago, and this follows a wealthy family in Singapore where there's a murder, and it's about how the murder is blamed on the Filipino worker, and eventually all the Filipino worker community, they band together to defend one of their own. So I'm expecting a lot of amazing class and privilege commentary on this, and it's really nice to see a story told from the perspective of the help, who is often just minimized, and it's very invisible in rich families. So that's what I know about this. I'm excited to get into it. I will keep you posted. And the last book that is on my TBR, and I'm sure I'm going to be reading more books than just this, but ones that I really actually want to finish. I have Financial Feminist by Tori Dunlap. I've started reading it. As you can see, I am about 40 pages in, and it's great. I already enjoyed the first chapter a lot. It's how to overcome the patriarchy's bullshit to master your money and build a life that you love. She's a founder of a business called Her First 100K. I'm not too familiar with what her business is, but this is a book about personal finance and financial literacy, obviously, but with a huge focus on how gender inequality, gender norms, systemic oppression, how all of that shapes your relationship with money, because we cannot look at financial education and financial wealth in isolation. It's not formed in a vacuum. It is an interaction with all of our it's a result of an interaction with all of our other life circumstances and experiences. Just to kind of give you a little bit of what to expect from this book, I'll read you a quote here. It says, "We live in a patriarchal world, a system that aids and abets inequality. In this system that has gate-kept financial information and tools for marginalized groups, it is an act of protest to be financially independent. It is an act of protest to overcome negative beliefs about money in order to save, pay off debt, invest, and find fulfilling work. It is an act of protest to prioritize rest instead of hustle, abundance rather than scarcity, and generosity in place of stockpiling." very excited about this book. I don't usually include my nonfiction reads. I read a lot of nonfiction, don't usually include it because I'm not sure if that's something that appeals to you. If you do want to see more of my nonfiction reads and recommendations, please let me know. I would be more than happy to share them with you. All right, thank you for joining me, everyone. These are some of my June hopefuls and about what I read in May. If you've read any of these, let me know. If you have any recommendations for me for Indigenous History Month as well as Pride Month, please let me know. I would be more than happy to engage in those. I'm always looking for more inclusive reads. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will see you in my next one.